And it came to be in the days of Ahasuerus. He is the Ahasuerus who reigned from Hodu to Cush, 127 provinces. In those days, when sovereign Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his reign, which was in the citadel of Shushan, that in the 3rd year of his reign he made a feast for all his officials and servants. The power of Paras and Madai, the nobles and the princes of the provinces, were before him, when he showed the riches of his esteemed reign and the splendor of his excellent greatness for many days, 180 days. And when these days were completed, the sovereign made a feast lasting 7 days for all the people who were present in the citadel of Shushan, from great to small, in the courtyard of the garden of the sovereign's palace. White and blue tapestries were fastened with cords of fine linen, and purple on silver rods and marble columns. The couches were of gold and silver, on a mosaic pavement of alabaster, marble, mother of pearl, and black marble. And they served drinks in golden vessels, the vessels being different from one another, with much royal wine, according to the hand of the sovereign. And drinking was according to the law, no one was compelled, for so the sovereign had ordered all the officers of his house, that they should do according to each one's pleasure. Sovereigness Vashti also made a feast for the women in the royal palace, which sovereign Ahasuerus owned. On the 7th day, when the heart of the sovereign was glad with wine, he ordered Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, and Abegtha, Zethar, and Carcas, the 7 eunuchs who were in attendance in the presence of sovereign Ahasuerus, to bring sovereigness Vashti before the sovereign with her royal crown, in order to show her loveliness to the people and the officials, for she was lovely to look upon. But sovereigness Vashti refused to come at the sovereign's command, brought by his eunuchs. And the sovereign was very wroth, and his rage burned within him. So the sovereign said to the wise men who understood the times, for in this way the sovereign's matter before all who knew law and right ruling, and who were close to him, Karshena, Shethar, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marsena, Memucan, the 7 princes of Paras and Madai, who saw the sovereign's face, who sat first in the reign. According to law, what is to be done to sovereigness Vashti, because she did not perform the command of sovereign Ahasuerus through the eunuchs? And Memucan answered before the sovereign and the princes, Sovereigness Vashti has misbehaved not only toward the sovereign, but also toward all the princes and all the people who are in all the provinces of sovereign Ahasuerus. For the matter of the sovereignness shall go forth to all women, to make their husbands despised in their eyes, when they say, Sovereign Ahasuerus commanded sovereigness Vashti to be brought in before him, but she did not come. And this day the princesses of Paras and Madai shall say to all the sovereign's officials that they have heard of the matter of the sovereigness with plenty of scorn and wrath. If it pleases the sovereign, let a royal decree go out from him, and let it be recorded in the laws of the Parisians and the Madites, so that it does not pass away, that Vashti shall come no more before sovereign Ahasuerus, and let the sovereign give her royal position to another who is better than she. And the sovereign's decree which he makes shall be proclaimed throughout all his rule, great as it is, and all the wives give esteem to their husbands, both great and small. And the word was good in the eyes of the sovereign and the princes, and the sovereign did according to the word of Memucan. So he sent letters to all the sovereign's provinces, to each province in its own writing, and to every people in their own language, that each man should be master in his own house, and speak in the language of his people. After these events, when the wrath of sovereign Ahasuerus had ceased, he remembered Vashti, what she had done, and what had been decreed against her. Then the sovereign's servants who attended him said, "Let lovely young maidens be sought for the sovereign, and let the sovereign appoint officers in all the provinces of his reign, and let them gather all the lovely young maidens to the citadel of Shushan, into the women's quarters, under the hand of Hegai, the sovereign's eunuch, guardian of the women, to give their preparations. And let the young woman who pleases the sovereign be sovereigness instead of Vashti." And the word pleased the sovereign, and he did so. In the citadel of Shushan there was a certain man, a Yahudi, whose name was Mordecai, son of Yair, son of Shimei, son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been exiled from Jerusalem with the captives who had been exiled with Jeconiah, sovereign of Yehuda, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the sovereign of Babel, had exiled. And it came to be that he was raising Hadassah, that is, Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman was lovely and of good appearance. And when her father and mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. And it came to be, when the sovereign's command and decree were heard, and when many young women were gathered at the citadel of Shushan into the hand of Hegai, that Esther too was taken to the sovereign's palace, into the hand of Hegai, guardian of the women. And the young woman pleased him, and she received kindness from him. So he hastened to give her preparations and her portions, and gave her 7 choice female servants from the sovereign's palace, and he moved her and her female servants to the best in the house of the women. Esther had not made known her people or her relatives, for Mordecai had commanded her not to make it known. And every day Mordecai walked about in front of the courtyard of the women's quarters to learn of Esther's welfare and what is done to her. Now when the turn of each young woman came to go in to sovereign Ahasuerus, after she had completed 12 months according to the regulations for the women, for the days of their preparation were completed as follows: 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with perfumes and with the preparations of women. Thus prepared, the young woman went to the sovereign, and whatever she asked for was given to take with her from the house of the women to the sovereign's palace. In the evening she went, and in the morning she returned to the second house of the women, into the hand of Sha'ashgaz, the sovereign's eunuch, guardian of the concubines. She would not come in to the sovereign again, unless the sovereign delighted in her and called for her by name. And when the turn came for Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her as his daughter, to come into the sovereign, she sought no matter but what Hegai, the sovereign's eunuch, guardian of the women, advised. And Esther found favor in the eyes of all who saw her. And Esther was taken to sovereign Ahasuerus into his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Teveth, in the 7th year of his reign. And the sovereign loved Esther more than all the women, and she found favor and kindness in his eyes more than all the maidens. And he put the royal crown upon her head, and made her sovereigness instead of Vashti. And the sovereign made a great feast, the feast of Esther, for all his officials and servants. And he proclaimed a release in the provinces, and gave gifts according to the means of a sovereign. And when maidens were assembled a second time, Mordecai sat within the sovereign's gate. Esther had not made known her relatives and her people, as Mordecai commanded her, for Esther obeyed the command of Mordecai, as when she was being raised by him. In those days, while Mordecai sat within the sovereign's gate, 2 of the sovereign's eunuchs, Bigthan and Teresh, doorkeepers, were wroth and sought to lay hands on sovereign Ahasuerus. And the matter became known to Mordecai, who informed sovereigness Esther. And Esther spoke to the sovereign in Mordecai's name. And when the matter was searched into, it was confirmed, and both were hanged on a timber. And it was written in the book of the annals in the presence of the sovereign. After these events, sovereign Ahasuerus promoted Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, and exalted him and seated him higher than all the princes with him. And all the sovereign's servants who were in the sovereign's gate bowed and did obeisance to Haman, for so the sovereign had commanded concerning him. But Mordecai would not bow or do obeisance. And the sovereign's servants who were in the sovereign's gate said to Mordecai, "Why do you disobey the sovereign's command?" And it came to be, when they spoke to him daily, and he would not listen to them, that they told Haman to see whether the words of Mordecai would stand, for he had told them that he was Yahudi. And when Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow or do obeisance, Haman was filled with wrath. But it was despicable in his eyes to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had informed him of the people of Mordecai. Therefore Haman sought to destroy all the Yahudim who were throughout all the reign of Ahasuerus, the people of Mordecai. In the 1st month, which is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of sovereign Ahasuerus, someone cast pur, that is, the lot, before Haman from day to day and from month to month, until it fell on the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Haman then told sovereign Ahasuerus, "There is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of your reign, whose laws are different from all people, and they do not do the sovereign's laws. Therefore it is not in the sovereign's interest to let them remain. If it pleases the sovereign, let a decree be written to destroy them, and let me pay 10,000 kikars of silver into the hands of those who do the work, to bring it into the sovereign's treasuries." And the sovereign took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the enemy of the Yahudim. And the sovereign said to Haman, "The silver and the people are given to you, to do with them as seems good to you." And the sovereign's scribes were called on the 13th day of the 1st month, and a decree was written according to all that Haman commanded, to the viceroys of the sovereign, and to the governors who were over each province, and to the officials of all people. to every province according to its writing, and to every people in their language. It was written in the name of sovereign Ahasuerus, and sealed with the sovereign's signet ring. And the letters were sent by the runners into all the sovereign's provinces, to cut off, to slay, and to destroy all the Yahudim, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their possessions. A copy of the writing, to be made law in every province, was published for all people, to be ready for that day. The runners went out, hastened by the sovereign's command, and the decree was given out in the citadel of Shushan. The sovereign and Haman then sat down to drink, but the city of Shushan was in confusion. And Mordecai learned of all that had been done, and Mordecai tore his garments, and put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the midst of the city, and cried out with a loud and bitter cry. And he went up to the front of the sovereign's gate, for no one might enter the sovereign's gate wearing sackcloth. And in every province where the sovereign's command and decree came, there was great mourning among the Yahudim, and fasting, and weeping, and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. And Esther's young women and eunuchs came and told her, and the sovereigness was deeply pained, and sent garments to Mordecai to wear, and to take away his sackcloth from him, but he refused. And Esther called Hathach, one of the sovereign's eunuchs, whom he had appointed to attend her, and she gave him a command concerning Mordecai, to learn what and why this was. And Hathach went out to Mordecai to an open space of the city in front of the sovereign's gate. And Mordecai told him all that befell him, and all about the silver that Haman promised to pay into the sovereign's treasuries to destroy the Yahudim. And he gave him a copy of the written decree to destroy them, which was given at Shushan, to show it to Esther and explain it to her, and to command her to go into the sovereign to make supplication to him and plead before him for her people. And Hathach came and told Esther the words of Mordecai, and Esther spoke to Hathach and gave him a command for Mordecai. All the sovereign's servants and the people of the sovereign's provinces know that any man or woman who goes into the inner court to the sovereign who has not been called, he has but one law, to be put to death, except the one to whom the sovereign holds out the golden scepter, who then shall live. But I have not been called to come in to the sovereign these 30 days. And they declared to Mordecai the words of Esther. And Mordecai commanded them to answer Esther, "Do not think within yourself to escape in the sovereign's palace any more than all the other Yahudim. For if you keep entirely silent at this time, relief and deliverance shall arise for the Yahudim from another place, while you and your father's house perish. And who knows whether you have come to the reign for such a time as this?" And Esther commanded to reply to Mordecai, "Go, gather all the Yahudim who are present in Shushan, and fast for me, and do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I too and my young women shall fast in the same way. Then I shall go to the sovereign, which is against the law, and if I shall perish, I shall perish." Mordecai then went away and did according to all that Esther commanded him. And it came to be on the 3rd day that Esther put on royal apparel and stood in the inner court of the sovereign's palace, in front of the sovereign's house, while the sovereign sat on his royal throne in the royal house, opposite the entrance of the house. And it came to be, when the sovereign saw Sovereigness Esther standing in the court, that she found favor in his eyes. And the sovereign held out to Esther the golden scepter which was in his hand. And Esther went near and touched the top of the scepter. And the sovereign said to her, "What is it, Sovereigness Esther, and what is your request? Up to half my reign, and it is given to you." And Esther answered, "If it pleases the sovereign, let the sovereign and Haman come today to the feast which I have prepared for him." And the sovereign said, "Get Haman at once to do as Esther has said." Then the sovereign and Haman went to the feast which Esther had prepared. And the sovereign said to Esther at the feast of wine, "What is your petition? And it is given you. And what is your request? Up to half my reign, and it is done." And Esther answered and said, "My petition and request is this: if I have found favor in the eyes of the sovereign, and if it pleases the sovereign to give my petition and perform my request, then let the sovereign and Haman come to the feast which I make for them, and tomorrow I shall do according to the word of the sovereign." And Haman went out that day rejoicing and with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the sovereign's gate, and that he did not stand or tremble before him, he was filled with wrath against Mordecai. But Haman held himself in, and came to his house. And he sent and called for his loved ones, and Zeresh his wife. And Haman recounted to them the esteem of his wealth, and his many sons, and all in which the sovereign had promoted him, and how he had exalted him above the officials and servants of the sovereign. And Haman said, "Besides Esther the sovereigness, let no one but me come in with the sovereign to the feast which she prepared. And tomorrow too I am invited by her, along with the sovereign. But all this does not suit me, as long as I see Mordecai the Yahudi sitting at the sovereign's gate." So his wife Zeresh and all his loved ones said to him, "Let a timber be made 50 amah high, and in the morning speak to the sovereign that Mordecai be hanged on it, and go with the sovereign to the feast rejoicing." And the word pleased Haman, and he had the timber made. On that night the sleep of the sovereign fled, and he commanded to bring the book of the records of the annals, and they were read before the sovereign. And it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teresh, two of the sovereign's eunuchs, the doorkeepers who had sought to lay hands on sovereign Ahasuerus. Then the sovereign said, "What has been done in value or in greatness to Mordecai for this?" And the sovereign's servants who attended him said, "Naught has been done for him." And the sovereign said, "Who is in the court?" Now Haman had come into the outer court of the sovereign's palace to speak to the sovereign to hang Mordecai on the timber that he had prepared for him. And the sovereign's servants said to him, "Look, Haman is standing in the court." And the sovereign said, "Let him come in." And when Haman came in, the sovereign asked him, "What is to be done for the man whom the sovereign delights to value?" Now Haman thought in his heart, "Whom would the sovereign delight to value more than me?" And Haman answered the sovereign, "For the man whom the sovereign delights to value, let a royal robe be brought which the sovereign has worn, and a horse on which the sovereign has ridden, one with a royal crest placed on its head. And let this robe and horse be given into the hand of one of the sovereign's most noble princes. Let them dress the man whom the sovereign delights to value, and make him ride on horseback through the city square, and proclaim before him, Thus it is done to the man whom the sovereign delights to value. And the sovereign said to Haman, Hurry, take the robe and the horse, as you have spoken, and do so for Mordecai, the Yahudi, who sits in the sovereign's gate. Let no word fail of all that you have spoken. And Haman took the robe and the horse, and robed Mordecai, and led him on horseback through the city square, and proclaimed before him, Thus it is done to the man the sovereign delights to value. Then Mordecai went back to the sovereign's gate, but Haman hurried to his house, mourning and with covered head. And when Haman related to his wife Zeresh and all of his loved ones all that had befallen him, his wise men and his wife Zeresh said to him, If Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is from the seed of the Yahudim, you are not going to prevail against him, but certainly fall before him. While they were still speaking with him, the sovereign's eunuchs came and hurried to bring Haman to the feast which Esther had prepared. And the sovereign and Haman came in to drink with sovereigness Esther. And again on the second day, at the feast of wine, the sovereign said to Esther, What is your petition, sovereigness Esther? And it is given to you. And what is your request? Up to half my reign, and it is done. And sovereigness Esther answered and said, If I have found favor in your eyes, O sovereign, and if it pleases the sovereign, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we have been sold, my people and I, to be cut off, to be slain, and to be destroyed. And if we had been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept silent, although the adversary could not make up for the sovereign's loss. Then sovereign Ahasuerus asked sovereigness Esther, Who is he, and where is he, who filled his heart to do so? And Esther said, The adversary and enemy is this evil Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the sovereign and sovereigness. And the sovereign, arising in his wrath from the feast of wine, into the palace garden. And Haman remained before sovereigness Esther, pleading for his life, for he saw that evil had been decided against him by the sovereign. And when the sovereign returned from the palace garden to the place of the feast of wine, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was. Then the sovereign said, Also to ravish the sovereigness while I am in the house? As the word left the sovereign's mouth, they covered Haman's face. And Harbona, one of the eunuchs, said to the sovereign, Also see the timber, 50 amah high, which Haman made for Mordecai, who spoke good on behalf of the sovereign, is standing at the house of Haman. And the sovereign said, Hang him on it! And they hanged Haman on the timber that he had prepared for Mordecai, and the sovereign's wrath abated. On that day, sovereign Ahasuerus gave to sovereigness Esther the house of Haman, the adversary of the Yahudim, and Mordecai came before the sovereign, for Esther had explained what he was to her. And the sovereign took off his signet ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. And Esther appointed Mordecai over the house of Haman. And Esther spoke to the sovereign again, and fell down at his feet, and begged him with tears to put an end to the evil of Haman the Agagite, and his plot which he had plotted against the Yahudim. And the sovereign held out the golden scepter toward Esther, and Esther arose and stood before the sovereign, and said, If it pleases the sovereign, and if I have found favor in his sight, and the matter is right before the sovereign, and I am pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to bring back the letters, the plot by Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the Yahudim who are in all the sovereign's provinces. For how could I bear to see the evil coming to my people? Or how could I bear to see the destruction of my relatives? And sovereign Ahasuerus said to sovereigness Esther and Mordecai the Yahudi, Look, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and they have hanged him on the timber because he laid his hand on the Yahudim. Now you write on behalf of the Yahudim, as it pleases you, in the sovereign's name, and seal it with the sovereign's signet ring. For a letter which is written in the sovereign's name and sealed with the sovereign's signet ring, no one turns back. So the sovereign scribes were called at that time, in the 3rd month, which is the month of Siwan, on the 23rd day. And it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded to the Yahudim, and to the viceroys, and the governors, and the princes of the provinces from Hodu to Cush, 127 provinces, to every province in its own writing, to every people in their own language, and to the Yahudim in their own writing, and in their own language. And he wrote in the name of sovereign Ahasuerus, and sealed it with the sovereign's signet ring, and sent letters by runners on horseback, riding on royal horses bred from speedy mares, that the sovereign has granted to the Yahudim who were in every city to be assembled and stand for their lives, to cut off, to slay, and to destroy all the power of the people or province that would distress them, little children and women, and to plunder their possessions. On one day in all the provinces of sovereign Ahasuerus, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, the copy of the writing to be made law in every province was announced to all the peoples, so that the Yahudim would be ready on that day to be avenged on their enemies. The runners riding on royal horses went out, hastened, and pressed on by the sovereign's command, and the decree was given out in the citadel of Shushan. And Mordecai went out from the presence of the sovereign, wearing royal garments of blue and white, with a great crown of gold, and a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad, for the Yahudim there was light and gladness and joy and value. And in every province and in every city where the sovereign's command and decree came, the Yahudim had joy and gladness, a feast and a good day. And many of the people of the land were becoming Yahudim, for the fear of the Yahudim had fallen upon them. And in the 12th month, that is, the month of Adar, on the 13th day, when the sovereign's command and his decree came to be done, on the day that the enemies of the Yahudim had waited to overpower them, it turned around, so that the Yahudim overpowered those who hated them. The Yahudim assembled in their cities throughout all the provinces of sovereign Ahasuerus to lay hands on those who sought their evil. And no one stood against them, because fear of them fell upon all people. And all the officials of the provinces, and the viceroys, and the governors, and all those doing the sovereign's work, helped the Yahudim, because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. For Mordecai was great in the palace of the sovereign, and his report spread into all the provinces, for this man Mordecai became greater and greater. And the Yahudim smote all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, with slaughter and destruction, and did what they pleased to those who hated them. And in the citadel of Shushan the Yahudim slew and destroyed 500 men, and they slew Parshandatha, and Dalphon, and Aspatha, and Poratha, and Adalia, and Aridatha, and Parmashta, and Arisai, and Aridai, and Wayezatha, the 10 sons of Haman, son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Yahudim. But they did not lay a hand on the plunder. On that day the number of those who were slain in the citadel of Shushan came before the sovereign. And the sovereign said to Sovereigness Esther, "The Yahudim have slain and destroyed 500 men in the citadel of Shushan, and the 10 sons of Haman. What have they done in the rest of the sovereign's provinces? And what is your petition? And it is given to you. And what is your further request? And it is done." And Esther said, "If it pleases the sovereign, let it be given to the Yahudim who are in Shushan to do again tomorrow according to today's decree. And let Haman's 10 sons be hanged on the timber." And the sovereign commanded this to be done. And the decree was given in Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. And the Yahudim who were in Shushan also assembled on the 14th day of the month of Adar, and they slew 300 men at Shushan, but they did not lay a hand on the plunder. And the rest of the Yahudim in the sovereign's provinces assembled and stood for their lives, and to get rest from their enemies, and to slay 75,000 of their enemies, but they did not lay a hand on the plunder. On the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th day of the month, they rested and made it a day of feasting and gladness. But the Yahudim who were at Shushan assembled on the 13th as well as on the 14th, and on the 15th of the month they rested and made it a day of feasting and gladness. Therefore the Yahudim of the villages who dwelt in the unwalled towns were making the 14th day of the month of Adar a good day of gladness and feasting, and for sending portions to one another. And Mordecai wrote these matters and sent letters to all the Yahudim who were in all the provinces of sovereign Ahasuerus, both near and far, to establish among them to observe the 14th and 15th days of the month of Adar yearly, as the days on which the Yahudim had rest from their enemies, as the month which was turned from sorrow to joy for them, and from mourning to a good day, that they should make them days of feasting and joy, of sending portions to one another and gifts to the poor. And the Yahudim undertook to do as they had begun, and as Mordecai had written to them, because Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, adversary of all the Yahudim, had plotted against the Yahudim to destroy them, and had cast pur, that is, the lot, to crush them and to destroy them. But when she came before the sovereign, he commanded by letter that his evil plot, which Haman had plotted against the Yahudim, should return on his own head, and that he and his sons should be impaled on the stake. Therefore they called these days Purim, after the name Pur. Therefore, because of all the words of this letter, what they had seen concerning this matter, and what had come upon them, the Yahudim established and imposed it upon themselves and upon their seed and all who should join them, that without fail they should observe these 2 days every year, according to their writing and at their appointed time, and that these days should be remembered and observed throughout every generation, every clan, every province, and every city, and that these days of Purim should not fail from among the Yahudim, and that the remembrance of them should not cease from their seed. And Sovereigness Esther, daughter of Abi-Hayil, with Mordecai the Yehudi, wrote with all authority to confirm this second letter about Purim. And Mordecai sent letters to all the Yehudim, to the 127 provinces of the reign of Ahasuerus, words of peace and truth, to establish these days of Purim at their appointed times, as Mordecai the Yehudi and Sovereigness Esther had established for them, and as they had established for themselves and their seed concerning matters of their fastings and lamenting. And the decree of Esther established these matters of Purim, and it was written in the book. And sovereign Ahasuerus laid compulsory labor on the land and the islands of the sea, and all the acts of his power and his might, and the exact account of the greatness of Mordecai, with which the sovereign made him great, are they not written in the book of the annals of the sovereigns of Madai and Paras? For Mordecai the Yehudi was second to sovereign Ahasuerus, and great among the Yehudim, and pleasing to his many brothers, seeking the good of his people, and speaking peace to all his seed.